Increased competition for land, for water, for forestry products, for mineral resources within the territories of East Africa seems to be a major trigger for inter-communal violence and just pervasive social tensions. Molu Tepo is a consultant for the Minority Rights Group International who authors a report recently released to this effect. Molu, thanks for your time. We know that there's been a debilitating drought in East Africa. That's been compounded by the conflict in Somalia spilling over into Kenya with refugees, and then Kenya attacking Somalia for terror attacks. So all of a sudden, there's just this amalgam of people looking for greener pastures, but not being able to do so because the security situation has been very complicated. Give us a picture of what's going on in the region.
Well, if we can look back, the last 3 years in Kenya has been, in Kenya and also in the region, the drought has been very bad. The threat of Al-Shabaab also in Kenya has been on the rise. And so the pastoralists and the minorities and the indigenous people in Kenya and in Sudan and in Uganda and in southern Sudan, they've been having huge challenges, facing huge challenges, and their livelihood depending on the natural resources, on the rain. Their survival is at great risk. And we carried out this report at the right time, and I think the recommendations which were made will be able to help the international community, the civil society, the communities themselves to think of ways of going ahead into the future.
Talk us through the key recommendations. What are you saying to authority? How must they deal with the physical insecurity caused by the political situation, and then also cope with the pressure on resources as they have so little to go around agriculturally in terms of land?
I think the whole challenge we have is on policy, and the policy has never been friendly to the pastoralists and the indigenous people and the minorities. And with the diminishing land, with also the impact on the livelihood from external threats like climate change, we are talking of a future which is bleak for the pastoralists and the minorities in East Africa. And the recommendations will definitely be carried forward by the international community, the civil society organizations in the 3 countries of Uganda, Kenya, and the Sudan. And we expect also the governments, institutions like the parliament to take up the challenge and respond to the needs of these marginalized groups within these 3 countries.
The issue about pastoralists and nomads in general is that they're always moving around. So it's really hard for any local government authority to get them into the system and try to put them within a welfare network where in the event of an economic downturn, they can receive food stamps or whatever is on offer, free healthcare. So how do you cope with that kind of dynamic?
I think the pastoralists have gone through, the pastoralists have been using this system of responding to their needs for ages, and they have knowledge, they have the wisdom. If only the governments can talk to them, can find out, the wisdom behind the movement of livestock, then I think we'll have solution. Movement is not for nothing. Pastoralists move because they respond to diseases, they respond to pasture, they respond to need for water, and also threat from external sources. So I think the solution lies with the people. The people must be consulted. They have the solution. If we can talk to them on equal level. The problem is that most of the time the government would come up with policies without consulting the pastoralists, and eventually the consumers of the policy do not even understand some of these policies.
Okay.
So I think
very briefly, we're in the midst of climate change talk, and these are exactly the constituency that our leaders are trying to address some of the mitigation and adaptation strategies towards. They're obviously afflicted by changing conditions, and that is why they move around. Practically, what sort of steps need to be initiated to ensure that even as they move around, they're moving into some sort of certainty, they're moving into dams that are full, they're moving into lands that can flourish, that they are using seeds that are adaptive, that they're finding markets for their livestock, that they're not, contaminating the air with livestock pollution, for instance, those sorts of issues?
I think for pastoralism to survive and for pastoralists to make livelihood out of the dry lands, I think we must try to think of innovative ways, fresh ideas, and this one will have to come from the people. Like, for example, most of the time the government will act. The actions of the government are reactive. And what happens is that we need to have some corridor, a livestock corridor, and also we need to think of pastoralism and livestock industry in these areas as gainful employment, as
yeah, we get the gist of it. Thanks so much for your time there, Molu Tepo. He is a consultant with the Minority Rights Group International.